Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Harry Fling Wrestling. I am your host, Harry Fling, and today we're going to be rewriting one more WrestleMania just before WrestleMania 42 this upcoming weekend. So it'll be a while, actually another year, before I rewrite another WrestleMania after today. So the last one we're going to rewrite before the season ends is WrestleMania 15, live from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, at the First Union Center, which later became the Wachovia Center, is now the Wells Fargo Arena. 2 years ago, I was at WrestleMania 40, just night one, with my brother and my cousin at Lincoln Financial Field. And man, Philly's a great host for WWE and professional wrestling in general. I went to WrestleCon, met a bunch of legends that weekend. So, this was March the 28th, 1999, and it is not one of the greatest WrestleManias of all time. And that's primarily because of the man behind the booking of this, that being Vince Russo. Vince Russo has been accused of being partially responsible for destroying WCW, though there's other parties involved. He's not solely responsible, but the booking certainly wasn't great, especially late 99 into all of 2000. Vince Russo's booking is very fast-paced. You ever watch a show produced by Vince Russo? You don't get a minute to breathe and digest everything you just saw, take it all in. One thing to the next, the next thing to the other thing, one thing to the next thing to the other thing, goes back and forth just like that. His crazy, fast-paced booking made this show, WrestleMania 15, feel like an episode of Raw. It was more backstage drama than anything else. I felt more attention was given to that than the matches, which is why I feel the matches suffered, especially when it came to quality and length. You need to have a good lengthy match to invest in the competitors, but I felt everything was rushed for the most part. So I'd rewrite it, but I'd not have Vince Russo involved in this writing. I'm sorry. Excuse me. But Vince McMahon was always, he was the chairman of the board, obviously, and he was always right above Vince Russo. So whatever Vince McMahon approved is what Vince Russo had to go with. And if McMahon approved it, it was a go. But in WCW, Vince Russo was kind of his own boss, so whatever he said went, and that's why we got the crappy product that we did with the booking, the matches, and everything thereto appertaining. But we're not going to talk about WCW 2000 today. This is WrestleMania 15. So I'd keep 10 matches as there were, and some I might keep the same, but there's a few that I would change up. So let's get started, shall we? Our first match would be for the Hardcore Championship, which by this point had already been around 5 months. And the current champion, Hardcore Holly, defending against his former leader of the Job Squad, Al Snow, the challenger. So, what a great match these two had at St. Valentine's Day Massacre, one of the final In Your House pay-per-views, the penultimate In Your House, and then Backlash In Your House 99 was the last. St. Valentine's Day Massacre, February 99, hardcore title. Road Dogg suffered an injury and had to vacate the belt. I don't remember that belt being vacated for very long, especially when the 24/7 rule came about. And Holly won the match there that night, but they didn't even battle in the ring. It started in the aisle, and then all the way backstage and outside the Pyramid in Memphis. And they made it to, I think it was like the Mississippi River, as close as they could possibly get. No, not the Mississippi River, but some body of water there, because Tennessee's landlocked. So, yeah, it was like 30 degrees, and it's freezing in the middle of February in Tennessee. And Tennessee gets pretty cold. I've never been there, but people say, they go through the seasons, unlike Florida. So, I remember at the end of that match, Bob Holly wrapped up Al Snow in chain link fence and trapped him for the 3 count, and fortunately the referee was able to undo the wrapping of Al Snow after the match, and they battled into the water, and that water's got to be like below zero, and finally made it back inside. But just the intensity and the bravery and the boldness and courage of both men to go out there and battle, and they're both wearing short trunks, short tights, and it's not like their arms and legs are covered up or anything. So they probably got some frostbite that night. So in this match, I would try to keep it more so centered in the ring, because the first time the hardcore title is being defended at a WrestleMania, use your chairs, use your trash cans and the lids, fire extinguishers, whatever you have to use, kendo sticks, guitars. So these guys didn't really use guitars. That's more Jeff Jarrett. And then at the end, I'd have Hardcore Holly pick up the Duke. He had a move which a lot of people would find offensive, but it's originally called the Falcon Arrow. It's a stalling suplex. Hold the guy up in the air for a lengthy time, then finally drop him, boom, just like that, vertically. So I would have Holly go over with that, but the move that he called it at one point in time was called the Holly Cost, and I thought that was very insensitive, especially those who were affected by the real life Holocaust or had family members that were survivors. So they really WWE should have never used that name as a finishing maneuver. Any names associated with past historical traumatic events, Holocaust. You got to be kidding me. So Hardcore Holly would win this match. He wasn't doing the Alabama Slam yet. And give Holly his first Mania win here. You know, I'm a big Bob Holly fan. I met him, Legends of the Ring 2015. He's a nice guy, despite what, you know, a lot of the wrestlers say he's like in the back, in the locker room. But to his fans, he couldn't be more down to earth. He let me hold his replica hardcore title. Sadly, that picture's on my old computer, which I'm having trouble recovering. So, yes, that would be that match. It'd probably go 7.5 minutes. That's really all it needs to go, lengthwise. Then they could have their other 2 matches at In Your House Backlash and then at Over the Edge. So we'll see where that goes. All right, our next match would be for the Tag Team Championship. This is the original World Tag Team Championship. That was, you remember the red belts from Raw from 2002 to 2010, that whole lineage. And Demolition, Hall of Fame inductees this year, were the longest reigning champions at 478 days. So this belt, this is the tag belts we're talking about now. The champions, this would be a triple threat match for the tag belts. 3-team triple threat match. Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett, the defending champions, with Deborah McMichael in their corner, defending against the Acolytes, Farouk and Bradshaw, also members of the Ministry of Darkness. And they will be taking on Too Much, Scott Too Hot Taylor, and Too Sexy Brian Christopher. Now, I didn't like the way this played out in real life. It was totally Vince Russo's influence. A battle royal took place on Sunday Night Heat, which was the pre-show earlier in the night on USA Network. It's free. And the 2 winners, the 2 last men remaining in that battle royal, would go on to challenge the tag champs, Owen and Jarrett, for the belts later on in the evening at WrestleMania. So the winners of that match ended up being Test and D'Lo Brown, of all people. Corporate team member Test and D'Lo Brown, Mark Henry's tag partner, with Ivory in their corner. So Test, D'Lo Brown, oh my God, strange bedfellows. They basically just didn't get along, and I think Russo wanted to set up a storyline like that. It's two heel teams, and here we got 3 heel teams. I think I keep Owen and Jarrett as close to faces as we can possibly keep them because they seem like the most babyface-ish of the 3 heel teams I'm talking about, Acolytes and Too Much. So, yeah, that was a weird match, and I think it just ended in a big schmoz, and it wasn't very good. And it's sad because that was Owen's 8th WrestleMania appearance and his last Mania appearance, sadly, before he died 2 months later. So, God, they could have done so much better for Owen around that time period, but they didn't. I think at that time they were going to go with the whole adultery angle where Owen's having an affair with Deborah, but he couldn't do that to Martha and the kids with them watching at home. It just wouldn't be fair. And Owen, good man for sticking up for that, but unfortunately that decision might have cost him his life because then the Blue Blazer storyline was the alternative for him turning down the, what's that word I just used? The infidelity storyline, the affair. Blue Blazer was punishment for turning down the infidelity storyline. So Owen didn't want to be that guy that always said no to everything, but Owen's a great guy. Ugh, wish I could have met him. So anyways, in this match, Owen and Jarrett, I would have them go over. Acolytes and Too Much would get distracted brawling with each other. You know, I could see a lot of great spots with Owen and Jeff and Too Much because they're the most athletic men in this match. You'd have the brute force and brawling coming from the Acolytes, Farouk and Bradshaw. And it wouldn't be elimination style, it'd just be sudden death. I could see Owen hitting like a spinning heel kick on Brian Christopher and getting the win there, and that's that. So Deborah would provide a distraction with her puppies, as she tended to do. So wouldn't be much to this match, but, you know, you get the right teams on here. At least we don't have Public Enemy on the card. You know, all know the story, Public Enemy, WWF in early 1999. They were so hated backstage, only because they were complete assholes and, you know, dicks to everybody, and they didn't respect the rules, didn't respect the other people. So that's why they were jobbed out each and every single match you saw them on. But for them to appear on Sunday Night Heat before WrestleMania, that's a big deal for a team that's not well-liked in the company. Acolytes especially hated Public Enemy. Next match, we'll go to a Falls Count Anywhere match. Originally, this was a match with Mankind and Big Show. Winner gets to be the special guest referee for the main event, Austin and Rock, for the WWF title. I would have Mankind already be the de facto guest referee just because he's going to already be wearing the shirt. Kane, it would make no sense. So I'd have Mankind versus Kane in a Falls Count Anywhere match. And I'd have this match because Kane is now a member of the corporation, and he only joined so that, you know, he wouldn't be committed to the insane asylum, you know, the psychiatric ward, with the guys in the white coats coming to put him in the straitjacket. They had that whole storyline going on at the time. So Mankind versus Kane, this one would definitely be outside the ring. It'd probably get as close to the boiler room as we could get. And then I think there would be a lot of distractions, either from Corporation or DX, because they're going to have a match later on in the night, and somehow that would distract Kane, and Mankind would get the win. 1, 2, 3. It's funny when they pin on the linoleum floors backstage. 1, 2, 3. Of course, I'm hitting a hard wooden table as I'm making that sound. But anyways, yeah, there wouldn't be much to this match just to get these guys on the card. And, they were tag team champions a year prior, so it would make sense for them to kind of feud a little bit. But there wouldn't be any Paul Bear, so it'd be a weird match, but I think it would be better than what we got with Mankind and Big Show. A lot of these matches will be kind of hard to get by just because, it wasn't, the Attitude Era wasn't all about the in-ring athleticism. It was about shock value. Crash TV for shock value to make us, get more invested from, a surprise standpoint. So, and it was for ratings, really. So, great matches are going to be a little tough on this card, so just bear that in mind. And I had a hard time kind of rewriting it from that standpoint. I'm not going to create a Savage Steamboat or Taker Michaels or Bret Owen on this card, so forget it. All right, match number 4. What do we have? Oh, yes. This match actually didn't happen, but the belt was defended. This is for the European Championship, only it won't be between Shane McMahon and X-Pac. Shane never needed that belt. I'm sorry, but I don't like the McMahons holding belts. Stephanie as the women's champion sucked. Vince as ECW champion was very insulting. I didn't mind Vince being the WWF champion because, WWF is synonymous with Vince McMahon. WWE still to this day, even though he doesn't own the company anymore. So at least give the man who's the owner of the company for X amount of years a very short reign with the belt. I'm okay with that. It was the WWF championship, not the ECW championship. That's another story for another day. It's neither here nor there. So in this match, I'd have Draws, who would have won the belt from X-Pac by hook or by crook a month earlier, be the defending champion walking into Mania to defend against the Lethal Weapon, Steve Blackman. Now, it seems like a weird choice, but I always liked watching these two. Not together, but I was fans of them growing up. Darren Drozdov had a very serious accident in October of 99, October the 5th, 1999, at a SmackDown taping at the Nassau Coliseum on Long Island. He was in a match with D'Lo Brown. He was actually challenging for Brown's European title at the time. A fan threw a fountain soda drink into the ring, and the concoction, or the contents of the drink, spilled onto the ring as D'Lo was going for a running power bomb, and the move was botched. Draws badly injured his neck, being the recipient of that move, and he became quadriplegic as a result. Couldn't feel a damn thing from here down. So I think it took 9 half-hour surgery, 9.5 hours of surgery to fix Draws up, but unfortunately it didn't do wonders because he was paralyzed from then on, although in later years he was starting to regain some feeling in his fingers, arms a little bit, limbs, but he passed, I think, in like 2023, so very sad that the career didn't work out better for Darren Drozdov. He was one of the few athletic guys that could actually work in the Attitude Era. He would do this running, spinning back elbow, and he'd get so much elevation and height on it. And he really should have been in another era like Ruthless Aggression, where they would have focused more on the in-ring performances of the competitors, not just the promos and the backstage drama. Steve Blackman, the Lethal Weapon. If you ever watch Wrestling Bios channels, so shout out to you, Mr. Wrestling Bios. Thank you for reliving the war these last 5 or 6 years. You're the man out there. Steve Blackman is like, the way people looked at Chuck Norris, I look at him like a god type figure, I guess. I don't know. Steve Blackman's the man. I met him, Legends of the Ring 2013. Nice guy. Asked about the Iron Circle match from Fully Loaded 99. He didn't particularly enjoy that match, but he got through it. Legitimate tough guy. Why is he not in the Hall of Fame? It's a crying shame. And if you ever watch Wrestling Bio's channel, they remix Steve Blackman's Ground Shaker theme. Not the drums in the night, but Ground Shaker with da-na, da-da-na, da-na, da-na, da-da-da, and they add lyrics. He's as cold as ice, willing to sacrifice. Duh. He's as cold as ice, duh, willing to sacrifice. And they go into this rap, which I can't recite to you. Go listen to it. Wrestling Bios. Great channel, great content, everything. He writes his own music, too. Gosh, this guy's a genius. Anyways, back to this match. It'd be nice to get these lower card guys on the Mania. European Championship was a third-tier belt, basically, right underneath the Intercontinental Championship, so it should have been used for those, lower mid-carders, not guys like Shane and X-Pac who could have... Well, X-Pac should have been Intercontinental Champion. That's another crying shame. But those are more upper mid-carders. But these lower mid-carders, that's why we have the European title and should be used in that fashion. So I'd have Steve Blackman get the Duke here. He deserved another belt besides the hardcore title, which he'd later get. And Steve would just use as many kicks, karate kicks, whatever, use some kung fu action. And that would be that. And Draws would, try to, I would think he would try to do some dirty tactics with some, piercing. He was a piercing and tattoo artist after all. So he might try to, use something from his box. Or maybe have Prince Albert accompany him to ringside and then give him some tools to use as weapons. And Blackman would somehow counter them. Got to get a little creative in this match. But one way or another, come hell or high water, Steve Blackman would end up victorious. Next match would be now for the Intercontinental Championship, and that was a 4 corners elimination. I'd keep that content the same. Actually, no. 4 corners, fatal 4-way, but sudden death. There's no elimination. We don't need the elimination part. I'd save it for a bigger marquee match, like WrestleMania 2000's main event. So in real time, we had the defending champion, the Road Dogg, at the time, defending against Goldust, Val Venus, and Ken Shamrock, because they somehow 3 out of those 4 men had a relationship with Ryan Shamrock. Ken is her brother, Val was her lover, and Goldust was her new lover, so to speak. I don't know, it was a weird relationship. And Road Dogg had nothing to do with this feud. Mr. Ass did. So Vince Russo, creative genius that he is, decides to swap the feud that the Outlaws are in. So Mr. Ass ended up going for the hardcore title, which he had no business in because Road Dogg was heavily involved feuding with Holly and Snow. And Road Dogg had no business being Intercontinental Champion or being in that title picture because Billy Gunn was feuding with Goldust and Shamrock and Venus. So, yeah, it was very ass backwards on the part of Vince Russo in booking this because it just didn't make sense. I understand they wanted to push the Outlaws into singles competition because they're getting so over. They're over as a tag team, which is great, but even more so, they can show more on their... They're able to carry themselves on their own with promos and in-ring ability. That's why the Outlaws are one of the greatest tag teams of all time, in my opinion. Glad they're in the Hall of Fame along with the rest of DX. Outlaws are going to be used in a DX match later on in the evening, so we'll save that for later. So the defending champion, I'd keep Val Venus, the defending champion. He would have won the belt from St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Ryan Shamrock slapped her brother. Okay, slap me. Alicia Webb was so green, she missed her cue to slap her brother. So that's always so funny to me to go back and watch that. Val Venus defending against Goldust, Godfather, and D'Lo Brown. Godfather would win this belt soon enough, but not tonight. So I'd have Goldust end up victorious because Ryan Shamrock is now the current lover of Goldust, and Blue Meanie considers Goldust to be his mommy or something. Oh my God, it's so sickening. It's so bizarre, really. And what do you expect? Goldust is the bizarre one after all. But I don't know, we could have done without the whole mommy thing, and that would have made it less creepy, if you ask me. So Goldust would end up victorious, but then he wouldn't hold the belt for very long because the Intercontinental title was a hot potato, which I actually didn't mind as a kid, but in the long run, you don't want to get in the habit of creating your second-tier belt as a hot potato. Same with the world title. So Godfather would win it soon enough, and then he'd go on to defend it and keep it until Over the Edge or something. I don't know. But anyways, that's as far as we'll go tonight. Goldust ending up victorious, and it would just be, your typical fatal 4-way match. 2 guys on the outside, 2 guys on the inside, and someone... Goldust would somehow get the pin. I could see him probably pinning Val Venus. Ryan could slap Venus and then do the same thing she did to Ken, her brother, at St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Okay, our next match for the Women's Championship. This one I keep exactly the same, only because, Sable was a hot commodity in Playboy, as much as I hate to give her credit. I think she's probably the worst female competitor I've ever seen. She's not even a competitor. She's just there all for show. They were big into the whole eye candy thing for the ladies in this time period, which is a complete contrast to today's women's wrestling, where the women are basically on top of the world, which I love. Girl power. Sable defending against the women's championship against the challenger Tori. No, not Tori Wilson. I'm talking about Tori from D-Generation X. Her real name is Terry Polk from Portland, Oregon. She's a yogi. She's a yoga instructor now. Always has been, always will be. Tori used to compete for Glow like Ivory did, Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling in the early 90s. Tori was a stalker fan of Sable's. Like the last Raw of 98, she started interfering in her matches or interfering whenever Sable would approach the ring to cut a promo. She'd bring a single rose to the ring, and then Jim Dotson, big burly, strong guy, head of security for WWF at the time, would remove her constantly. She was basically a fan obsessed with one of the divas, basically. So Sable would actually end up winning this match because you got, as much as I hate to do this, you got to give her the win. If she's being promoted in a magazine such as Playboy, and WWF's doing great business with them because of the era that we're talking about, this is all adult content. Sable would have to win, and then keep the storyline the same, where Nicole Bass interferes and becomes her de facto bodyguard for a short time, and then Sable ends up leaving the company a couple of months later due to sexual harassment claims, which doesn't surprise me. So yeah, Sable would win with help from Nicole Bass, and I could see Tori maybe feuding with Nicole Bass afterwards, or all the women for that matter, just because Nicole's going to be responsible for Sable retaining the belt going forward, at least for a little while longer. Next match. It's the same match, but different outcome. This is the Brawl for All boxing match. Brawl for All was shit. It looked good on paper, but the execution was terrible. Guys got hurt because they didn't know how to box. They were gassed and winded because they're not trained with the same cardio that boxers are trained with. And they're uncoordinated. So the really only legit boxer here was Bart Gunn and maybe Dr. Death Steve Williams. And Dr. Death was knocked out pretty early on in the first round because of Bart Gunn's carelessness, supposedly. So Bart Gunn actually got punished in this match in real time and lost in like 35 seconds to Butterbean. So this would be Butterbean versus Bart Gunn, only they'd complete 3 1-minute rounds like you're supposed to do in boxing. And Bart would actually win based on the point system. Don't just knock the guy out in 35 seconds. You spent all this time setting up the ring, putting those little lines on the ropes. Those are how boxing ring ropes look so they don't fall out of the ring. And you put these Everlast pads on the turnbuckles. So boxing rings are set up much different than a wrestling ring. Boxing's actual sport compared to wrestling, which is more theatrical. And make Bart look legit. And they spent this whole summer booking him strong in that tournament, and he needed something to do post-Smoking Guns. He certainly wasn't going to have the same run as Billy and the Outlaws. So he won the Golden Glove on an episode of Shotgun, or he was presented. I was there at a taping in New Haven. My brother and a friend of ours went to see that. And, New Haven Coliseum. And, just Bart could capitalize on this momentum, and they could have pushed Mike Poklopek a little bit more in 99 and then not have him be out of the company after that. He could have been a legit tough guy in the hardcore title division. That actually would have worked for him. But no, they had to go this route and make him look like a complete jabroni. What a dweeb to just get knocked out in such a short amount of time. On a pay-per-view, no less. So Bart would win, and they set up the ring, and then they had all this press. Vinny Pazienza, legendary boxer, would be the guest referee. And of all these judges, including the late, great Gorilla Monsoon. Oh, he looked so frail in his very last appearance before he died in October that year. Robert James Morella, referee Joey Morella's father in real life. Gorilla Monsoon was diabetic, and he had a lot of health problems, which is why he had to resign from his presidency, and that was the last time we ever had a president on screen, and that's when the commissionership came into play with Commissioner Slaughter, and now we had Commissioner Michaels. Gorilla Monsoon, his health was not great, so he was largely absent throughout 98 and, of course, 99, but he had enough, strength to come back and be a judge. He just waved to the audience, and then they showed his name in the lower thirds, Gorilla Monsoon. That was the last time we saw him. He died October the 5th of 1999, and I was sad at 10 years old because I knew who he was. I remember watching him as the president, but then I went back and watched tapes where he was a play-by-play guy. Heenan and Monsoon, great stuff. Monsoon and Ventura. He was great with anybody he worked with. So... next match would be an 8-man tag. This was not featured on the card, but I'm putting this on because we never got a showdown between D-Generation X and the Corporation. D-Generation X with Triple H, X-Pac, Road Dogg, and Mr. Ass, so I'd keep the Outlaws together still, then they can go their separate ways after. Taking on the Corporation, Test, Shane McMahon, the Big Boss Man, and Ken Shamrock. Test and Shamrock would later join the Union a couple of months later. Actually, that stable was called Up Yours, Union of People You Ought to Respect, Son. Test, Ken Shamrock, it was Big Show and Mankind. They were all ex-corporation members, upset at how they were treated in the corporation. So they'd still be with the corporation here, corporate team members. And I'd have the corporation go over DX here because DX seems like they're kind of dwindling a little bit in popularity. Maybe not dwindling, but I feel like they've reached their peak at this point in time, so they could kind of pass the torch over to the corporation, make them the next strongest stable. And of course, the corporation will merge a little bit later on to become the corporate ministry. So, as far as who gets the Duke, maybe have Shane pin X-Pac in this one, like he did in real time for the European title. Or Triple H could actually turn heel this night like he did in real time. Oh, this is so genius. China would be accompanying DX on the outside, so China would already be there. So, China would fend off other corporate team members that might try and interfere, if any. And then Triple H would pretend to help out X-Pac, go for a pedigree on Shane, but nope, he'd turn his attention to X-Pac, kick him in the stomach, pedigree, and give Shane the cover. What? And that would be the end of DX right there. Somehow Kane would come out just like he did in real time, fend off, the other members of the corporation, and he would leave the group ultimately, and then not join DX, but sort of ally with X-Pac, and that become their little thing. And then, I don't know, the Outlaws would have to end up feuding. DX would fall apart this night, and Triple H would be responsible for that. So that's perfect booking right there. Vince Russo can't even think of that, dumbass. Sorry, I got a little overzealous. I got 2 more matches to go. The Hell in a Cell match, that was so atrocious in real time, especially the hanging of the Big Boss Man. Notice how I'm taking Boss Man out of that match. So this would be between The Undertaker and The Big Show. Big Show would be a bigger threat as a corporate team member, so I think he'd be better to take on Undertaker. Boss Man just didn't come across as a threat to me when I watched that match. Even when I go back and watch it all these years later, it just felt like a segment on Raw, really. It was just bad. The wrestling was uncoordinated. The action was slow and stale. Taker won in 9 minutes, and the Brood came down from the ceiling. They descended from the rafters. Now, how did they make it safely and Owen Hart didn't? That's another question for another day, but it just occurred to me. And they threw down a rope, and then they created this whole symbolic hanging of, no, not symbolic because they actually were hanging, but a symbolic ending to the corporation, I guess. Some symbolism involved. Big Boss Man was hung, but he was actually wearing a vest underneath, and all Undertaker did was put a clip on a carabiner hook to the back of his vest, and then and then the rope was hanging around him loosely, so he had to act like he was actually being hung. So that gave me some relief. That was reassuring to know he actually wasn't being hung. I figured, no, they're not actually going to hang a guy. He'd die. Paul Bear's controlling the cell maniacally from the back, lifting it up, going like that. So in this match, Undertaker versus Big Show. Big Show would actually be a threat here. He just wears giant black trunks and black boots. Maybe he was still Paul White, but I'd actually have him with his entrance music. Well, it's the Big Show! And he'd do a few choke slams here and there, but ultimately Undertaker would end up using outside interference in the form of steel stairs, and then ram him into the Hell in a Cell cage. Use that to his advantage. And maybe Paul Bear could provide some outside interference some way, somehow, even though he wasn't carrying the urn at that time. And then Taker would win, not with a tombstone, because physically he can't do it, but maybe with a choke slam or old school. He could probably go for old school, and then that would be that. But no hanging. I would just have him, do his little pose right above Big Show, or maybe draw a symbol on his forehead, and that's about it. But no hanging. Come on, we're way past that. We're much better as a society. That just looks bad. In general, I don't care if this is professional wrestling or not. We don't do that anymore. I'm sorry. So that's that match. And then finally we get to our main event, which I'd keep exactly the same. Stone Cold Steve Austin challenging The Rock for the World Wrestling Federation Championship. This would be the first of their 3 matches, and probably the worst, because WrestleMania 17 is a classic, untouchable. WrestleMania 19 was a great send-off. That was sad because it was Austin's last match, but we knew why, because of all the neck injuries building up. This match would be the spark of a lengthy feud for the next 4 years. Austin, funny story, you notice he wore a t-shirt that night. I think it was a DTA shirt or something like that. He left his vest in his hotel room in Philly. He forgot his vest, so he had to walk out to WrestleMania wearing a t-shirt, which looked very out of place, because Mania, you're usually best dressed or wearing something that you wouldn't wear on an episode of Raw ordinarily. So Austin comes out, and then him and Rock are just going to brawl through the announce table. Jim Ross would be calling this match, not Michael Cole. I'd probably get Jim Ross to call the whole event, not just the main event. Jim Ross was suffering a Bell's palsy affliction at this time. They tried to turn him heel, which didn't work out, with Dr. Death Steve Williams as his enforcer. Michael Cole wasn't ready. He was too green to call WrestleMania, so he shouldn't have been calling it. But anyways, Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler would be calling this match. Austin Rock, I'd keep it exactly the same. Vince would come out and try to sabotage Austin as best he could, but to no avail. And Austin would get the 1, 2, 3, and Vince would look at him and go, "No!" Ah! That's Vince getting all heated, turning red. And a stunner to Vince, and Austin would hold his beer and his belt up, doing the middle finger pose, and fade to black. That's it for WrestleMania. 1999 was definitely the year of Stone Cold Steve Austin, so he needs to carry that belt to the next year. And eventually he'll have to get that neck surgery because, unfortunately, what happened at SummerSlam 97. So anyways, that's my take of how I would rewrite WrestleMania 15. Let me know in the comments section what you think. Hopefully we get a good discussion going. I like to hear other people's opinions on how they would rebook these shows. It could be better than what I come up with. It's not a competition, but it's just the idea of sharing your thoughts about these things. And this has been another great edition of Harry Fling Wrestling. I am your host, Harry Fling, and until next time, everybody, bye-bye.